today. I'm not going to start speaking. Thank you very much. We're just waiting for our Botswana delegate and panelists to log in. She just messaged me now. She was in, but she's logged out and reloading in to make sure that we can all hear and see one another. So if you can give us a little 3 minutes for us to get there. I thank you for not honoring the thing that they call African time. We advertised 5 o'clock, and that ACA is proud to honor those who join us at this time of the day. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't know what sort of weather you've been facing there. We've been having chilly mornings out here in Harare. We started a low of about 7 and a high of about 25 in the day. So in the morning, yeah, we blanket up, but we're doing well. Ndate Kgoshi, how are you doing, sir?
I'm great, man. Doing well. It's winter, it's cold, trying to keep warm. But otherwise, we soldier all day.
1,000 blessings, 1,000 blessings to you.
How are things on your side?
They always could be busier. You know, one always hopes for busy activity. But yeah, we've got an election year coming up. So our politics tends to overwhelm our economics. So big decisions and big checks being signed are a bit slower. The day after the election, I promise you, we're going to be doing amazing.
No, it's expected.
Thank you. And then we'll watch you guys next year when you're going through your stories next year.
We are worried already, I tell you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Neltah, are you in there? I'm seeing you as an attendee. I don't know if our IT guy needs to give you privileges to speak. I'm a democratic guy. I recognize everybody. There we go. Neltah, the mic is yours. Just, can we see you and hear you?
And can you hear me now?
We can, thank you very much.
Okay,
And we can
see me.
There we go, the rose amongst the thorns. In 2023 and with Chat GPT, you've got to make sure that there's a real life human being on the other end. Otherwise,
right?
we might be talking to very clever computers.
It's getting very scary if you ask me.
Quite. Right. On my side, I correct. So I'm delighted about that. Thank you very, very much to the delegates who come through, who've registered. Rose, Richard, Primrose, Pelisiwe, Ntabiseng, Nomfundo, Stephen, Monica, Markim, Lumbani, Kudzai, Katleho, everybody, Fungai, Disejo, Andile. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. This is a free presentation as Africans connecting with one another and sharing ideas and getting to understand what's going on the other side of borders, I think only strengthens our local operations. So as property practitioners across the continent, and I see one delegate from Holland, as property practitioners predominantly here in the Southern Africa, we thought picking up the phone, jumping on a computer and speaking English, if anybody wants to speak another language, so long as we have a translator, I think that's highly acceptable. But just to put a spotlight on 3 areas, our delegates are myself, I'm Kura Chihota, here in Harare. I'm joined out of Botswana. I'm not sure where in Botswana she is, but
Capital city of Gaborone.
In Gaborone, fantastic.
Yes.
Good to have you there. And then sitting, I presume, in Johannesburg, we have the Valua himself, Kgoshi. How are you doing, Kgoshi? Okay, I've got picture on you, but no sound because you're muted, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. So I'm going to go off video there, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Are you seeing a screen from me?
Yes.
Fantastic. So our evening topic today, and we've got 1.5 hours. It doesn't mean that we're going to drag it out for the 1.5 hours. We've got 3 areas to cover: Zimbabwe high level, Botswana high level, and South Africa. Then, because of the strengths of the parties that are here, just wanted to get a sense of what's going on there. But to increase takeaway value for all of us, also have a Q&A session. So welcome to you. Thank you for responding to the flyer or the Facebook post, Instagram, Twitter that we put out there. This is the first or the second of a series of monthly gatherings where, as Africans, we want to put our heads together and shed light on one another. So we have the founder and director of Tempest Gold from Botswana, and then we have the chief executive of the valuers in South Africa joining us on the panel. So really the conversation today is to educate one another. You know, and property operates in an environment where there's an economy, and giving each other a sense of what are those drivers, inflation, currency issues, how do they impact on this beloved asset class of ours? Then to take a view on where we're going by particular sectors, because it affects different markets differently, what's going on in, say, offices in Gaborone or self-storage in Johannesburg. Then put that into some context. What is the health of our asset class? Is it growing? Is it declining? A stockbroker would put out a hold, buy or sell recommendation. What kind of a view are we taking there? But I really want to maximize on what are the opportunities, because real estate is always a localized game played with other parties. So the person who is in that area can give you some advice on what are the pockets of opportunities that are there. So those are the questions that we're going to walk through with our panelists. They're going to freestyle it. It's not a classroom where they must answer line by line, but it's to end up at that point that we have some insight into where they are. So basically, I am sitting in Harare. Zimbabwe is a 20 billion GDP economy. And our number one issue, I believe, is our inflation rate. Our inflation rate, if you measured it only in our Zimbabwe dollar, we are probably in the 400%. If you look at the official statistics, because they blend the Zimbabwe dollar inflation with the US dollar inflation, we still come up to close to 100% on that inflation. So inflation, as you would understand, makes our leasing difficult and pricing of our leasing, let alone the valuation of our assets. When we get to valuing assets, there are a number of players on the stock exchange, and you will see significant qualifications from the auditors because of the statements and the reliability of those valuations. The valuations are done according to Rick's Red Book, but in a hyperinflation environment, there can be questions arising out of that. Our transactional capacity is we do transact in the main in US dollars. We have 3 listed counters on the stock exchange, and they've all reported that their rentals are 70% plus received in US dollars. All of the sales that happen in real estate, unless it's coming out of the state as a central sale or a local government entity transferring in a municipality, those sales will go through in United States dollars. So we're a dollar environment. What developments are pushing us? We have incredible land hunger, where residential development and demand is for increasingly dense properties. So the northern suburbs of Harare have seen great densification, where 8,000 square meter plots get subdivided into 4,000, 2,000, or putting in clusters on about 500 square meters each, and you build your house. In the peri-urban areas, because housing stock is short and expensive, if you look at our old historical townships, people are moving further out as we've improved road networks, going out 30, 40 kilometers out of Harare. You have double lane highways getting out there, so access has been improved. So our peri-urban areas to the north, Domboshawa, to the east, Goromonzi, to the south, Harare South. You're seeing people buying what were communal areas or old farms that have been, some legitimately, a lot illegitimately subdivided, and small plots, 200, 300 square meters. People are building and looking to protect themselves from inflation. You can imagine rentals are running rampant. They're in dollars, whereas if you're salaried, you're typically receiving Zimbabwe dollars at an ever diminishing purchasing power parity. So people are investing in real estate. Commercial, you'll see a lot of activity happening along arterial roads into and out of the city, where people are not necessarily large institutions, but more owner-occupiers, owner-operators are converting a house on 4,000 square meters into a showroom or an upmarket office or service office suites, or creating 50 or 40 square meter mini malls where people are selling a variety of goods as the CBDs are decanted. On the capital market side, because real estate has demonstrated that it's held its value, it is highly prized by investors. The capital markets have responded to that. We've had one successful REIT listing at around $22 million. We had a second development company try to come to the market with a $30 million IPO. It was less well supported, but we have appetite from institutional and retail investors to play in the listed property space. We do have REIT legislation, and one is active, and we have another 5 that have been legislated and been given a license, and they're coming through to the market. So what's the overall picture? We as Zimbabweans often look at our own book and we can complain a lot about what we're not doing, but on the ground, there are transactions that are happening. It's useful to give it some sort of context and scale. So Victoria Falls, similar to the dynamics with South Africa versus Western Cape and Cape Town in particular, Victoria Falls is almost a province all of its own. It has seen a post-COVID rebound, numbers are increasing, and the hotel stock rooms are being improved. And the latest one was a 63 key upmarket hotel developed by Old Mutual. The current rack rates there, if you go on bookings.com right now, you'll see they're asking about 550 a night, which is quite high for the country. But because of the volumes of airlines operating into Victoria Falls directly from South Africa, now as well from Europe, there's been significant uptake there. We've seen local institutions partnering to create student accommodation product. The first successful project at scale was done down in Bulawayo, 500 rooms, but it's 2 beds per room. That came in at about $15 million US. Long money, taking a view and creating an asset so to provide accommodation. There still remains a significant deficit of student accommodation, and smaller players with different risk appetites are taking up that space. We have had the development of something like, I wouldn't put it as a Santon Mall, I would say more Gaborone, Mogoditsane, or something like Sibili Center, something like that. We've got 10,000 square meter new malls that have come through. Another several are planned at that sort of a scale. But as part of a real estate investment trust that listed last year, we saw about 8,000 square meters of new stock coming through, capital value of about $21 million. Then the rave, and if you go on Google Earth and you play with the time-lapse photography and you zoom in on Harare North, you would see how the densification of the northern suburbs has been, particularly along sewer lines, and easily, and I just started counting and then I stopped when I got to about $50 million of capital product being developed. The model differs. There's some very high-end stuff coming in at about $800,000 a unit, but the majority of it is in the $200 to $400 US for a unit there. The state has embarked on some major infrastructure spend. So they jacked up Beitbridge Border Post, our single most important 1 square kilometer in the country, where about 30% of state revenue comes from duties and taxes. So on a private-public partnership with some South African financiers, they created a mixed-use precinct where the border post has been improved, but then there's ancillary equipment that goes along with that, staff housing for the border staff and what have you. Then we are at the point where our agricultural exports, we have had a significant improvement in our tobacco sales. I think we had, since land reform, I think this is our second highest total that we've ever produced. And then that has had a push on effect into warehousing and distribution, and easily $30 million is being invested in additional capacity in the warehousing space. So those are the numbers. These are the pictures. Top left-hand corner, that is the Palms in Victoria Falls. Be ready to pay $550 a night to stay there, but lovely views of the river and a serene place. To the middle column, that's Highland Park, developed very familiar to South African and Botswana, open air mall, anchor tenant being Pick n Pay, and then a number of line shops and eateries where you'd feel quite at home spending your rands, dollars, and pulas. The third column on the right, that is the Beitbridge border post, open 24 hours. I don't think we've got it quite right yet with our South African neighbors in terms of making it a one-stop shop, but that is the planned integration that we intend to see. The big block, first column, bottom row, that is the institutional student accommodation that we've put up. The big blue box is existing tobacco warehousing facility. So something that's familiar to all of us, 30,000 square meters under roof for tobacco to be exported. And then the final quadrant there is the cluster housing, where on a piece of land, you cut it up and you have some communal facilities in the middle. What are the opportunities? What is blowing us forward? I think the opportunities that exist on the ground is because of our economic circumstances. Lending in Zimbabwe dollars does not make a whole lot of sense. So we don't have an established mortgage market and ready providers of capital. So equity is required on a develop to sell model, where perhaps older parents, children have left home, they're empty nesters, and they're sitting on significant parcels of land. Or it could be the other way around, where parents have passed on and have left significant parcels of land to their heirs, creating joint ventures to develop product and sell. There's a ready market for that. We see Zimbabweans having traveled even just across the border to Tete in Mozambique, or Lusaka, or Gaborone, Francistown. We like things, and the things are driving a more sophisticated retail choice and convenience malls or improved shopping districts, where it's a 2,000 square meter anchor, a Pick n Pay, a Choppies, a Spa, with some line shops that go along that. There is ready appetite and uptake for that. Modern warehousing is in short supply. We tend to be as our manufacturing base shrinks because of our economic challenges and availability of power, we're tending to be distributing things that we've imported from elsewhere. So storing those distributed goods require modern warehousing. And if you build something with 5-meter eaves heights with dock level loading, 5,000 square meters and above, you'll find ready takers paying you $5, $6 a square meter for that. Student accommodation remains an area of interest. The credit model is not yet perfect, where institutions do take a view, but in my view, the credit model is reliant on households where mom and dad have sold their last goat and chicken to get the child to school. There isn't an offtake commitment behind that rental. So while you've got the student, it works, and on smaller scale, 20, 50, 100 unit private residence is created. There's some security there because you can act like a normal landlord. But when you go into an institutional space where you've got 1,000 people and you've got land, perhaps on a PPP with the university, it has another element of politics and control around it. So the credit model, I think, is needing some enhancement there. Then I talk about growth point growth, where we have now become a largely US dollar-based economy. A retailer wants to access those dollars. So in our rural areas or semi-rural areas, we have people with very real cash, and the till doesn't really care where it came from. So the establishment in what we call growth points are decentralized rural areas where they will put in a central municipality with offices, a post office, a retirement fund, and all that sort of stuff. So the opportunities to acquire real estate there, to put in kind of tenants, your jets, your distributors of agricultural implements, stock feeds, day-old chickens, they're expanding their network outward, and following the dollar out there only makes sense. Then we're seeing significant redevelopment of assets. So intelligent land banking, and I call it intelligent because you have to have a strategy. It's not just picking up the asset and sitting on it. There are assets that are mispriced. So if you are looking at arterial roads or junctions where two major roads meet and there's development further down because of greater densification, if you can acquire a strategic site and repurpose it from one house sitting on 4,000 square meters to the developments that we're seeing are new office blocks, perhaps on sectional title, new retail, new leisure activities. We've got facilities similar to jump and bounce, where you take the kids to be kids and doing back flips on trampolines. There is a market for that disposable spend, but it's got to be in the right place. It's got to be on a double lane road to get you in and out conveniently. And if you're creating a diversion off a main road, the city council will typically require you to upgrade the infrastructure, road widening, street lights, traffic lights, for you to be able to enhance those opportunities. So in short, as my president would say, Zimbabwe is open for business, but it is tough going. It is US dollar based. We do experience significant inflation in US dollars, but at the end of the day, 44% of the assets held by our institutions are held in real estate. So there are off-takers who are looking to buy and acquire very real assets that hold value. Your investments are going to be received, the rentals are going to be received in US dollars, and then that makes the feasibilities make some sort of sense. If you don't have that US dollar base, it's very hard to work out and keep a spreadsheet looking anything reasonable and sane when the exchange rate has gone from 1:1 to 1:100 to 1:1,000 to 1:7,000 in the Zim dollar to the US dollar. So for stability's sake, we account in US dollars. And for now, the US dollar supply is there, and real estate is a safe haven for our investors. So with those few words, that is the overview of where we are for the country called Zimbabwe. I'm going to then take any questions right now. If anybody has, just raise a hand, or I'm going to go over to the First Lady of Real Estate in Botswana and ask Neltah to join us. But firstly, any questions on Zimbabwe? Neltah, yes, please.
Hi, Kura. Thank you so much for the informative presentation. This is just a question that I would like to find out from an investor's point of view. Would you recommend an investor at this current moment to invest in real estate in Zimbabwe? And if so, what type of real estate would be more profitable and give a good return on investment?
Okay, thanks. Great question. And it's been quite something in the past 3-4 months that I've received calls, and I have 2 active projects with South African professionals looking to invest for dollars. So firstly, that South African professionals are calling into Zimbabwe, being a curious place, but from Johannesburg, we are closer to Harare is closer to Johannesburg than Cape Town is. So from a flight distance, it's quite easy. The money that is coming in is typically quieter money and looking for a turn. So it's not the South African take a 10-year view, get finance and wait the finance out. In year 7, you typically would have paid back and redeemed the debt, and then you start enjoying the equity upside. So the partnership models that I've seen working here are typically diaspora investors, or more, not hedge fund, but more in and out kind of investors who are providing the capital, often under some sort of export guarantee, where they've bought materials, particularly finishes in South Africa, and provided them into Zimbabwe for the sale in dollars. So bricks, cement, river sand, the processing fees can be dispensed or increasing. In the past, it was easier dispensing that in Zimbabwe dollars, but the finishes typically for the high-end stuff that you import, people were then getting equity participation. So you, with a suitcase of pullers, would come across and you would buy equity into a project, and then the redemption of your equity would be on the sale out of that particular project. So you want stuff that has got shorter timelines.
Right.
If you're doing larger commercial, I think 12 months is a long exposure in this environment. So you'd want to do clusters or warehouses, steel structures or rural developments where you can be in and out in about 6, 8, 9 months.
Right. And one topic, especially here in Botswana, that shook up our industry a little bit was the Transfer Duty Act. What kind of tax is imposed on non-citizens when they're looking at investing in Zimbabwe or purchasing property in Zimbabwe? Do you have those numbers, perhaps?
Sure. We have an open for business policy. We have no restrictions on foreign ownership of urban freehold land. There is restriction on ownership for everybody. It's not just Zimbabwean citizens on farmland, because that was our land reform process where the state acquired the majority of old white-owned farms. Yes, there are still some pockets of black-owned title-deeded farmland, but that's in the minority. But in town, a piece of ground with a title deed is freely owned and transferred between parties. When you transfer, there will be capital gains tax. Capital gains tax has 2 regimes to it. If it was a property acquired, call it 20 years ago, you will have a flat tax of about 5%. But if it's acquired within, call it 10 years, you're going to see when you dispose, there'll be 20% of the gain, but that is uniform between citizens, between foreigners, or with anybody else. So there's no prohibition, and there's no different treatment of foreign money than local money. If you're bringing in money to buy property, you have to come through the Reserve Bank to get permission to take it out again. But we do have that facility available.
Thank you so much, Kura. That's it from me for now.
Thank you, ma'am. I've got a question. Do you experience load shedding in Zimbabwe, and how extensive is it? We do. We have significant, because our reliance is on South Africa, and we do have local power generation, typically out of Hwange, our coal station, and Kariba, which we share with Zambia. The situation has improved in the last 2-3 weeks, but it has been significant and has hampered our development and our manufacturing capacity, where running generators for significant periods just drives the costs crazy. So it is very real. So we've gone green with a lot of our developments, not out of looking after the environment, but just operational efficiency. And I think that operational efficiency has also got people leaving the CBD to move out into premises that they can put a generator, drill a borehole, so that you know that you've got power and water at your particular premises. Back to you, Neltah.
Speaking on electricity, what's the status like when we're talking about alternative energy sources to power, real estate, properties? Is Zimbabwe exploring solar panels more than, like coal that we use here in Botswana? Are there any alternatives that you'd see potential property developers trying to incorporate to maximize and also make sure that the expenses when it comes to electricity are slightly reduced? So what's the social, the solar aspect part of the solar aspect of Zimbabwe looking like for real estate?
Thank you for the question. We are in a great area, just as you are. The insolation does lend itself to solar provision, but our official electricity supply is too cheap. We pay perhaps 6 cents a kilowatt hour, where an independent power producer, for them to make a megawatt or gigawatt factory power station work, they need about 10, 12 cents to make it work. So most or a business will do a 10 or 15, 20 kVA system at home, but we do not have significant IPP players who are plugging in and providing that space, because when we do get electricity, it's so cheap. So we do more backup power rather than saying we're shifting the whole curve onto a sustainable basis.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome. Stephen says, do you see USD liquidity and mortgage financing improving in the short term, and now that the economy is largely US dollars? Our challenge is funds matching. I don't have the latest figures, but our accounts tend to be transitory. If money comes in on a payment or as pay a salary, we typically move that money out within 21 days. So for the bank to be able to lend significant term funding on the back of short-term money becomes rather difficult. Our existing mortgage conditions are you'd be typically presented with 5 years. If you're extremely lucky, you're going to get 10 years, but that is US dollar funding at anywhere from 12%. One bank has got a particular product at 12%, but I'd say the benchmark rate on US dollar mortgages is about 15%, and you'll look at the tenor on that being between 5 and 10 years. All right. Okay, thank you very much. That's our corner here, the little teapot country called Zimbabwe.
Sorry, Kura, there's a question from Ashilo.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mren, before you run off, I'm amazed at the rate that you're paying for electricity. I mean, you procure your electricity from South Africa. I mean, the game in town in South Africa is this sustainability finance, the sustainability bonds. You understand? And
yes.
Those things are at a rate, and that's how you make the buck out of them. And then I would imagine that you getting electricity from South Africa means that there's an import of that rate that you have to suffer. Is there some subsidy that government is giving so that your rate can be so different from the actual procurement rate that you're importing on energy?
Thank you. So we don't exclusively rely on imports. We do generate locally, and when you generate locally, you then have an internal subsidy there. The power station is not the best managed and is not commercially driven. It's listed and it should be an entity that delivers huge profits. We should be selling coal, we should be exporting coal, but there's an inefficiency within that. Then on top of that, we have the similar situation with your municipalities, where a wholesaler provides, and then the municipality, which is the retailer, is not really collecting and remitting. So we do have a challenge. There's an inherent, it's a subsidy. Because it's a state-owned entity, it's politically sensitive. If you change the electricity rate, all things go through inflation, drives inflation a lot. So it is artificially held back, and it is a subsidy. Thankfully, since post-COVID, I think it was, we used to have a subsidy on our petrol as well. We would import it in dollars and sell it in Zimbabwe dollars, never at the cost recovery kind of basis. That has moved away. They now entirely sell petrol in US dollars. So in electricity, if you're an exporter or if you're a commercial entity, they're charging you in US dollars. So the big users, your mines and agricultural users, are paying for those drawdowns in US dollars. But me sitting here in my residential house, I get away with paying Zimbabwe dollars, which is a subsidy.
Thanks, Kura. Kura, we had a comment from, well, Nomfundo has her hand up. She has had up for a while. Maybe you can just hand over to her, please.
Sure, Nomfundo. I'm not sure if she's got speaking privileges.
I'm not sure either, but there's also Kgoshi.
Okay, Kgoshi, go ahead.
Yes, Kura. I know that the former president, may so rest in peace, before he departed, he authorized, obviously through bilateral agreement with South Africa, to improve the Bay Bridge. So my question is, I also heard some guys who are into logistics complaining about the cost of utilizing the Bay Bridge in terms of you having to go across, pay in dollars and becoming expensive. So the question I have is relating to property. What have you seen to be sort of improvements where property is concerned in line with the new entry point being increased in size? Are there any new spin-offs that you guys are seeing already, or do you expect it to be a bit of a long-term type of a thing? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, it's going to have to be long-term to carry the kind of financing that's gone in there, $300 million US. I think transporters have taken a view. If you look at the cooperation between Zambia, Botswana, creating Kazungula, so you now have a route going from South Africa north to get to Zambia and go to DRC. You don't have to come through Zimbabwe anymore. So Beitbridge really needs to pull up its socks. We've had the transport infrastructure improve to get us there. We're dualizing that road from Beitbridge, trying to get it's arriving through to Harare, and then beyond that to go out through Chirundu to the north going into Zambia. If that improves, then we can have a corridor that makes sense. But we have had a decrease in traffic volumes because people are now bypassing Zimbabwe, but we need to sort our costings out there. It is expensive. For me to drive across to visit my cousins in Venda is going to cost me about $70 to cross, to go down. So that's 1,000 plus rand for me to go and see people on the other side of a river. But it's a revenue line. It was a very expensive refurb that was done, and it's something that's with us, and it'll need to be made to work. We don't have significant toll revenues. We do have tolls across the country, but they're nowhere as regular and as expensive as in South Africa. We have tolls. It's a flat $2 US within local roads between towns to pay on a toll. So I can get anywhere in this country, literally 3 toll roads, and I'm going to pay $6 US for revenue generation. That key area being Beitbridge, I believe, is significantly taxed. Right.
Thanks, Kura. Nomfundo is back.
Okay. Nomfundo, over to you.
Nomfundo, we can't seem to hear you. I think if it's possible, you can just type your question and we can read it out to Kura.
I'm going to switch off my camera and we're going to put the spotlight on the First Lady of Real Estate from Botswana. After Nomfundo's question, Neltah, the floor is going to be yours.
All right, not a problem. I think let's just give Nomfundo a minute or two. But there was also a question from Stephen. Do you see USD liquidity in mortgage finance improving in the short term now that the economy is largely USD?
And that was the question that I answered in saying that the deposits are not matching the kind of facilities people are trying to draw down on those deposits. Our deposits are short-term, so the lending tends to be short-term.
Okay. Thank you for that. Nomfundo, I think we're still struggling. If it's possible, kindly just type your question in the chat box. And we'll have presentation. As mentioned, let me just, I am the founder and managing director of a company, valuations, estate agency, as well as consultancy expert. Oh, over to you, Nomfundo. Nomfundo, over to you.
No, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
yes.
Excellent. Sorry about that. So my question is twofold. Firstly, I want to ask, what's the appetite towards technology partners? I mean, there's a lot of real estate management tools out there that sort of manage the end-to-end process from land use, construction, running, and then maintaining an asset of that nature. What is the appetite towards such technology? Firstly, and then secondly, where are we at with smart cities?
Over to you, Kura, I believe.
Sure. I'm going to keep it brief so that we've allocated time fairly. Technology will be the game changer. We're quite a small market, so we have really three, call it MDA-worthy type of property managers who need a system that is somewhat sophisticated and can do integrated reporting. So the smaller guys can do smaller systems, but it's scary to know how much of it gets done on Excel. And then smart cities, we do have a number of them planned. We have a new city to the north of Harare that is planned next to our new parliament. And then if we go out to the east, there's an area called Melfort that is also designed to plan to be a smart city where the whole concept of integrated, not just the physical space, but then talking about wiring it and making it seamless to interact with all citizens as digital citizens and work from anywhere is the plan. Okay, so I'm going to take that number down, and Nomfundo, I can follow that up with you, but can I give the mic over to Neltah?
Thank you so much, Kura, and I hope Nomfundo's question was adequately answered. In short, I was just briefly explaining what we do, which is property valuations, estate agency. We're trying to focus a little bit more on market researches as well as feasibility studies, because COVID did mess up everything. I'm sure we're very familiar that we're in the recovery process right now. So we have a lot of locals, but as well as foreigners that are looking into invest in Botswana, but they don't know where to start. They don't know what's safe and what is not sound. Also, we have linkages with a lot of financial institutions, which are also looking at providing affordable housing and also not just reaching the Gaborone areas or the bigger towns such as Maung. Okay, to you guys, it might be very small. We're only a population of 2.2 million, if I'm not mistaken. Our city center, Gaborone, we have 200,000. So we're quite a small population, which also makes it a little bit difficult when it comes to foreign investors looking for different types of properties. So I'd like to just go a little bit in depth with what has been very, very controversial, if I can say, and something that we've been discussing a lot, not only as real estate professionals, but also as Botswana, as well as foreign investors that were looking into investing into Botswana. We have what is called the Transfer Duty Act. I did ask Kura a question earlier on if there is any sort of transfer or VAT or tax that is charged by the government on foreigners investing in Zimbabwe. So here in Botswana, the government had enacted the Transfer Duty Act, which stated that foreigners, or non-citizens rather, would have to pay 30% transfer duty. So say, for example, you're going to purchase a plot or a property rather that is 1 million pula, then you have to add on top of it 30%, which really affected our market. 30% is quite a large number. So we could see there was sort of a decline in foreign direct investment when it came to that. But on the plus side, our citizens were actually happy because there were a lot of exemptions that were made. For example, one exemption that was made was that the transfer duty threshold for citizens was increased from 1 million to 1.5 million. So if you're purchasing a plot that's between 1 million to 1.5 million, you would not have to pay for the transfer duty. Luckily, I think after a little bit of backlash, the government decided to re-amend the Transfer Duty Act, and currently the transfer for foreign investors with non-citizens has been reduced from 30% to 10% for a value of a property that is up to 2 million. Of course, after the valuations have been done by either a professional or the valuers that sit in the bank, if they're going to be getting mortgages from banks located in Botswana, and 50% on the value or in excess of 2 million, which is quite significant. It's half of what initially foreigners had to pay to purchase property in Botswana. Now, when it comes to the areas that are popular, I'm just gonna give a general overview. In Botswana, what's popular, it's the tribal land that we have, and also freehold land. But freehold land here in Botswana, it's really in short supply. So the demand for it is high, but the supply is low. Then we do have tribal land. Now, with regards to tribal land, if you are a foreigner or a non-citizen and you are looking to purchase tribal land in Botswana, you would have to go through the Ministry of Lands and to get an exemption to actually be allowed to purchase tribal land. It's a little bit of a tedious process. You know how governments work. I don't know if it's just a Botswana thing, but I'm sure a couple of you can relate to some of the inefficiencies that we can be faced with when it comes to dealing with government departments. So right now, just to put it into perspective, for the locals who are waiting to be allocated land in Botswana, because Botswana has given every Botswana the right to own land. So from the age of 18, once you're 18 years old, you can put an application for a tribal land to be allocated to you. Now, I was just doing a little bit of research, I think 2 days ago, and one particular place in Botswana, just outside of Gaborone, Kura did mention it, in Mogalakwane, we have an application list of 700,000 people in the waiting list. And it's anticipated that they will only get allocated the land in 26 years. So you can see that there is quite a lot of demand when it comes to, you know, just the average Botswana wanting to own land. But in all fairness, most of them get allocated land once they have passed away. So it'll probably have to be inherited by their surviving spouse or their children. Now, let's get a little bit now into the residential market here in Botswana. Botswana is quite an interesting market, and I think there's quite a lot of potential when it comes to residential. Botswana prefer land that is we prefer standalone properties compared to apartments. We have this thing of wanting to have a big yard, wanting to be able to have your bride there, have your family over. We're not really into apartments, but because of the lack of property and service plots, you'll find that there is quite a lot of activity in terms of development of apartments or estates that are sectional titled, just to make sure that there is property available in the market, maybe not necessarily the property that we'd like, which has a huge yard and a lot of privacy, but we are seeing an influx in those. And that's mainly in Gaborone being areas such as Pakalane. Pakalane is It's I think it's our biggest suburb here in Botswana. They're also doing a lot of gated community, very high-end residential properties. And we have other places such as Kura. Also, the apartments are absolutely high-end. But what consumers complain about, well, from the local citizens, it's the pricing. They feel that prices in Botswana are a little exorbitant, and I can somehow agree with that, because when I travel to South Africa, I do quite a lot of traveling back and forth, and when I'm looking at what Sandton can afford, what a 2-bedroom apartment in Sandton is going for, it could probably be maybe 600. I think I saw one for 650 pula in Sandton, but if you're going to get it here in Botswana, it's probably going to be 900,000. So there's also that that complaint from the general public that properties in Botswana are generally very, very expensive to purchase, which doesn't favor the citizens at all. Now, when we're looking at foreign direct investment, it's mainly agritourism. Botswana is well known for its tourism sector, of course, thanks to the Okavango Delta, and also, like Kura mentioned, with the Kazungula Bridge merging the 4 countries together. There's quite a lot of activity up north in the Kasane areas, the Delta areas, the Maun areas. So you'll find a lot of times that investors who are looking at investing in Botswana, especially those from Europe or South Africa, and America as well. We actually have Americans who are interested in purchasing, just a nice riverfront property right next to the Okavango Delta. That's something that they'll typically gravitate to, or sort of like a holiday home. If you just want time away from the hustle and bustle of the city, the bigger cities, and say Australia or New Jersey, wherever you're located, you just want to come to Botswana, you can get yourself a nice residential place in the riverside and enjoy the safaris, enjoy the wildlife. So that's the trend that we are seeing maybe when it comes to agritourism, specifically for foreigners. Now, in terms of commercial, our commercial is oversupplied, where we have quite a lot of commercial buildings, most of them being in the CBD, and they pretty much came up at somewhat of the same time because there was a specific development covenant that the government had instructed the property owners to abide by, make sure that you have developed within 5 years. So that caused an influx in the oversupply of the properties. But another interesting that I've noted is there are a lot of countries that are seeing and appreciating the stability of investing in Botswana and also expanding their businesses into Botswana. We've had inquiries from Zimbabwe, we've had inquiries from South Africa, Dubai. You find a lot of countries now, just being comfortable with Botswana because unlike other countries, sorry, Kura, to say, like Zimbabwe, inflation rates are pretty standard. The cost of gas is pretty standard. We don't have crazy load shedding like South Africa. So Botswana is a safe haven when it comes to investing. And I would 100% encourage someone to look into the different types of investments that they can get in Botswana. As well as agriculture, just to touch a little bit more on agriculture, there was a ban that was put which prohibited Botswana from importing food, vegetables, as well as fruits from South Africa. So South Africans obviously were not very happy. The government wasn't happy. I believe they're still trying to challenge that ban. And this has made our agricultural sector grow a little bit more. And this is where now people are starting to, play with the idea of agri-tech. People are playing with the idea of drip irrigation and agritourism, for example, as I mentioned earlier. You'd find a situation whereby you have a big farm, say 15 hectares, that's quite normal here in Botswana. Then you break it down into a horticultural area where you'll be doing your commercial agricultural business, and then you could possibly put up chalets and make it also a safari type of property where people who are visiting and are crossing over into those countries in the Gazungula areas can actually have a pit stop. You know, just have a little camping area where they can stop, refresh themselves, sleep overnight, then get back to drive into another country of their choice. So that is also a positive. We are also interested in obviously getting investors who are looking at investing in Botswana as well as the solar. Botswana is extremely hot. It's a semi-desert, so we are trying to also capitalize as much as possible on that aspect, that we have so much sunlight, but what are we doing with it? And just the load shedding question, we do have load shedding here and there, but it's absolutely nowhere near what South Africans are unfortunately going through. So business disruptions are really not that much. We do have scheduled maintenances, I'm sure, as with every other country or market. But in terms of load shedding, it's not something that I would say it's a big concern to citizens or to non-citizens who are looking at coming into Botswana. And finally, when we're looking at industrial, there is a boom in the industrial sector as well. I think this is just also because of the Citizen Empowerment Act, which is trying to, you know, localize everything and support Botswana in actually producing their own food, as well as manufacturing, as well as making sure that everything that's related to building and real estate is sourced from Botswana. So that's also something that is actually grown. There are quite a number of warehouses in Gaborone, which is our capital city, but we should I think it's also important for me not to just focus on Gaborone. There's an area called Maun. Maun is, I think, one of our second largest towns, and you see that there's a lot of retail development there. Similarly to places such as Francistown, a lot of retail development. Gaborone, a lot of retail development is going on in Gaborone, and most of the companies that or the retailers that do set up shop here are obviously from South Africa, but we're slowly but surely getting international retailers that are looking at penetrating the market here in Botswana. So yes, that's basically an overview. To answer any questions. If there's something I didn't touch on, Kura, please feel free to let me know, and I'll be happy to answer. Yes, Kura?
Thank you very, very much. If I can throw the first question there, your retail seems overdeveloped to me. Is that sustainable? Are rentals still being received? When we all came out of COVID, what was the world like with you guys? I think you've got a more per square meter for every person in Gaborone.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, if you take a look at Airport Junction, it's one of our popular malls. It's one of the biggest as well. After COVID, they did an expansion actually, and it's pretty much fully let. So I would say the sustainability aspect of it, it's still there. Our latest mall being the Fields Mall, it's also located in the CBD, quite massive, and the uptake is extremely great. I think they probably have 10% vacancy rate, if I'm not mistaken. It's a very, very low vacancy rate. So they still that uptake. I do agree with you in the sense that there's probably an oversaturation of retail malls in Botswana. But obviously, if they are developing them, there's a demand for them, and vacancies are very manageable. They're very manageable and affordable, actually, also.
We have a question from Richard there. With the oversupply of commercial space, what are the rental like per square meter, and how good are the yields?
Okay. With the oversupply of commercial space, rentals usually, yes, in the CBD, we're looking at 100 to 110 pula per square meter. I think in dollars, I could probably safely say maybe $88. Unfortunately, though, we have seen also some companies having to downsize after COVID rather. So there is still a lot of vacancies to some extent in some areas where they just had to downsize. Maybe they would have 4 entire floors, and then now they have sized it down to 2. Our escalation, just to give you an appreciation, ranges between 8 to 10%, and our leases pre-COVID were 5 years, usually standard 5 years. But after COVID, now people, because they're unsure of which direction the market is going to go, we're usually keeping smaller term leases, which are 2 to 3 years. Now, in terms of the yields, I would say the yields are pretty good. Definitely above 50% of the yields. I would say safely between 70 to 80% when it comes to yields in the commercial space. Yes, Remashilo?
Yeah, look, I mean, you a couple of, it's probably the question that I'm going to ask, or it might be convoluted and come out like a statement, but I mean, there are shiny toys that are sort of dropping in your market of late. I mean, if you, after that big circle from the airport was finished, I think about last year or 18 months ago, you can see there's a few toys that are dropping, quite a number of chain hotels that are coming up, and
right,
and at the rates that are like Santon rates, those hotels, you know, and the last I checked, I mean, I was in Botswana, I do travel there quite regularly, is that the vacancies were not that great. And the second thing is, it's, you know, if you can just talk about what's the idea behind, because as you were saying in your presentation, that in terms of hospitality market, and I'm talking commercial hospitality, the interest is more around, if you look at the Mpumalanga sort of type of market in terms of hospitality. So that's a comparison for Botswana. But the shiny toys that are landing in Gaborone, and with their, I mean, obviously it's hotels, their occupancy levels that are sort of mid 50s, the last I checked, but that was like late last year. What's the big idea? I mean, you know, where are they eating into your traditional tourism market, or there's a growth that maybe some of us are not seeing? Urban tourism, which is driven mostly by conferencing. I know one of the challenges that it's in Gaborone is you've got a very limited availability of conferencing or large conferencing spaces, and whether is that catering for that market, just the views around what is that trying to achieve. Secondly, in the housing.
Just Remashilo, just before you go to your second question, with regards to the conferencing, what was your experience in Botswana? Where do you think there's a lack? I just want to understand why you feel there's a short supply of conferences in Botswana.
So, I mean, it's conferencing we're talking about. I mean, we're talking properties, we're talking space. So if you look at the way that you measure conferencing, it's the same we measure hotel occupancy. It's relative to the population that would attend conferencing. So if you look at your commerce or business, and you look at as a rate of 1,000. So if you look at business as a business or commerce as a rate of 1,000, you don't have lot numbers unless you import these conferences somehow. You don't have the numbers that can drive conferencing. I mean, if you look at Santon and you look at Cape Town, they're able internally drive those numbers, because if you look at commerce in Cape Town by itself, and you look at the number of square meters that's available for conferencing, that commerce can support at least up to 60% internally within Cape Town. And then the rest of that utilization, space utilization for occupancy, will then come from external users on conferencing, because it's business travel, right? I mean, what drives conferencing is business travel.
Right.
So the level of either you're anticipating level of business travel into Gaborone to rise. That is why you've got those shiny toys that are rocking up, or you are expecting your business tourism something to happen, and I'm not seeing it. If you look at the business tourism numbers into Botswana compared to leisure tourism is rising faster. That conversion, where is it coming from?
Just to throw another question to you, can you name one shiny toy here in Botswana in Gabs?
I mean, how many hotels did you drop in the last 18 months to 2 years? I'm talking about paying hotels. I mean, it's quite a bit.
What you mean.
It's quite a bit.
I understand where you're getting at now. So I think it's twofold really. Like you said, Botswana has been hosting the Forbes 30 under 30. This was our second year hosting it. So the hospitality industry definitely boomed in that sense. So I think we can consider it business travel, business tourism rather. But when it comes to local conferencing, I personally don't think we are short supplied. Because most of the conferences that we have, which are locals, we usually get conferences from conference centers. We do have conference centers, and because we're such a small population already in Gabs, we don't need a massive place. You'd find that most conferences at maximum, maybe they will take in 200 people. If it's conferences that are for dignitaries and that are for presidents or so on, or these SADC meetings, they'll simply just go to a hotel that has a conference facility, and it works well. I've honestly, personally, never had a situation or come across a situation where people are saying we don't have, but Gabs doesn't have the capacity to accommodate a large number of people. But that's my personal experience and what I've observed.
I suppose 18 months is a short period of time. Maybe tourism, business tourism is anticipated to grow. I know that Botswana has gone on a drive to attract, in terms of foreign direct investment, to attract businesses into the country. So maybe that comes from there. My second question is around housing. I mean, one of the challenges, and I remember reading this with some study, but you would pick it up that is the market changing? I mean, it's a two-pronged question. The one is you'd see that, especially around Gaborone, I haven't seen it when you go to Maun, as you say, people prefer freehold housing. Is that, but you do have a growth in townhouses. There's quite a growth, especially if you go towards, my geography might be cockeyed here, but if you go towards north, between the airport and the north of Gaborone,
the block 8, block 10 heading to
a big growth of townhouses.
Yes.
And it sounds like it contradicts what you are saying about the type of product that market is interested in. Is it because the population, the demographics are changing, and what drives that? The second thing is, it's one of the challenges I think that was raised previously with regard to residential was the availability of service land, particularly for developers, whether for affordable housing or first-time buyers, that kind of product, that there's not enough service land. So even if you can acquire land,
it's not serviced.
Cost your initial costs would exceed your earnings, because you have to dig deep into your pocket to make that scheme work. And those will be my two questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rea Mashilo. Starting off with the townhouses, you're absolutely right. There is a huge influx of townhouses being developed in Gabs and the greater Gaborone area. What we're finding now is, because land supply in Gabs, we pretty much don't have land supply in Botswana, or in Gaborone specifically. So now the greater areas, the areas that you're talking about when you're headed towards Pakalani from the airport and going up north there are a lot of townhouses. But the target market, usually, some of them are luxurious, yes, but others are just standard start-uppers. For example, for early stage professionals, where the rent for a 2-bedroom would be like 5,000 pula. In rands, that would be maybe 6.5, just as an estimate. So I believe the influx with the apartments is probably two-faced. Number one being the fact that they are attracting a different demographic now. They're attracting the youth, they're attracting people who don't really enjoy the traditional farm life like maybe our parents did. They want to be in the city, they want to be closer to the mall, they want to be closer to the clubs, that kind of thing. And when we refer to the freehold land is there, but it's very expensive, and it's most times not serviced. So that's also a problem that we're faced with. And I did mention earlier that we have a long waiting list. That doesn't mean that we don't have that in Botswana. It simply means that it's not serviced, like Mashilo is saying. So the problem that Parliament tells us that they have is that they are not able to service these pieces of land, and makes it hard for them to just freely allocate them, but not being able to provide the necessities to live, the utilities, and so on and so forth. So that was the first question, Mashilo. The second one was based on.
It's just the affordability, but you have answered part of it when you're talking about whatever. I mean, look, are we seeing, and Kgoshi's got his hand up, come in, and just touch on the listed. I know your listed market is not as big as what. Are we seeing upcoming some of these assets at some point being put up on the bourse to be picked up for public listing?
No, not at this particular time. We have Time Projects, which I believe has a footprint in Zambia. We have RDC, they specialize in commercial, residential, tourism, hospitality. We have Far Properties, which is also just a wide area, but right now it's mostly private entities. And for the larger private companies that I've engaged with, the founders or the directors, they're not looking at listing at this particular juncture. So I wouldn't say in terms of listing we have too much of many options here in Botswana. Kgoshi, I think your hand was up.
My question is, in Botswana.
Sorry, you're a little bit faint.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but it's a little faint, but you can go on, sir.
Yes, I was saying that, which other cities are you guys seeing developing, trying to emulate what you are doing in Gaborone, is there in Botswana? Are there any other cities that you guys are pushing hard to try and see them shine up as much as you are doing with Gaborone?
Yes, definitely. I did mention Maun. So Maun is it's mostly our local tourism area. I think I could somehow compare it to Durban and how South Africans view Durban, just to get away from Gaborone, just have a little bit of a breather. So Maun is coming up very strong. There are a lot of there are a lot of retail developments coming up in Maun. So that's one of the areas that I would also, if someone is looking at investing, that I'd also ask them to consider. We also have Palape. Palape is where we have one of our second biggest universities. So obviously there's a demand for residential accommodation there in that area. We have Francistown. Francistown is our second biggest city. And same with Francistown, it actually has a similar vibe as South Africa. As Botswana, but with a little bit of elements of Harare. So you find that there are quite a lot of Zimbabweans, especially Caucasian Zimbabweans, who have settled in Francistown, and it's not a township. It's basically just like Gaborone. that's how I would describe it. It's it's thriving in the sense that even if you're looking at the pricing of the properties, the values keep going up and up and up. There's a high demand of that as well. Then lastly, we have when we're going back now to the agricultural sector, we have where the desert is, the Kalahari Desert. We have a lot of interested foreign investors, some from Ghana, others from South Africa, who are interested in setting up solar panels there to power most of the areas here in Botswana, which are close by. So yeah, I would say look into Palape, look into Francistown, Maung, and obviously Kasane. Kasane is where the tourism area is, where the Okavango Delta is, where the Gazumbula Bridge is. So those are the ones that I would suggest that you can look into if you're not looking at investing only in Gaborone. Do you have any other questions?
Us Zimbabweans can only take Francistown type heat. We can't come to Gaborone.
No, Gaborone is very, very hot. But at least for now, we're enjoying a little bit of winter thanks to South Africa. So it's not as bad as it usually is. Nomfundo, I don't know if that was a question for me, but I think it was for Kura regarding smart cities. Yeah. Over to you, Kura.
What's the next big thing out in Botswana?
In terms of?
In the real estate space, what do we have to keep our eye on to say, oh, wow, I'll remember Neltah said this, and then we invested and we made millions?
We really need solutions to affordable housing. And I don't think it's just a conversation that's being had in Botswana. It's happening everywhere. Like when I just, deliberate and talk to other real estate professionals, in different markets, that is, we acknowledge that there's a problem with affordable housing, but how are we targeting it? How are we reducing the cost of construction? Are we going to be moving away from the brick and mortar to something different, smart cities of that sort? What exactly can we do to to be in a place to provide affordable housing? So Kura, if you know an investor with a good product, a good methodology of how we can bring affordable housing here into Botswana, please do let me know. Or if there's anyone who's really interested, as well as student accommodation. Student accommodation is also quite important. Just to give a quick overview, our government sponsors students to go to tertiary education and tertiary university. They're given an allowance of close to 2,000 pula per month. That's just to live in allowance, for your accommodation, for your transport, you name it. Now, what you would find is these students, unfortunately, because of the cost of living, they can probably just afford a very, very low cost one-bedroom house in the outskirts, like in Mogalakwane, where it's a little bit of the slums, the ghettos, and it's not something that looks nice, but that's the most that they can afford. We need to find something in Botswana. We need solutions that help us provide these type of accommodation to people who may not necessarily afford them. But another thing, just quickly, sorry, Kura, just quickly, when we're talking about financing, we have companies, financiers rather, microlenders, who are now targeting rural areas. They're moving away from the safe, secure ones of getting a mortgage in Gaborone, getting a nice 5-bedroom mansion in Pakalani. They're trying to now empower Botswana in owning property. So they finance in terms of purchasing the plot as well as building the plot. So that's also another option. And if there's anyone who's interested in knowing more about this type of housing, which is for lower income individuals, feel free to reach out to me. As foreigners, you can also invest in that.
Thank you very much, my sister. And I think
Thank you so much.
This is Africa. Private goods with public services In Zimbabwe, we have our national housing policy that says it's the state's responsibility to do the road and the pipeline and the trunk sewer to the plot, but they don't have the capacity. So as a private developer, you end up doing it, you push that cost on, and out the window goes affordability. We don't have the kind of South African resources. Maybe Kgoshi can tell us how they got that right in producing over 2 million units through RDP in the past 27 years.
Yeah.
But Neltah, my sister, first lady in real estate in Botswana, thank you very much for your insight.
Thanks
people
so much,
can ask questions, I'm sure. Now,
yeah.
to the big brother in South Africa, Kgoshi, the valuer himself, the man who keeps the pulse and knows what is going on and the elements that make up value. Please, can you walk us through what's going out through? I'm sorry to say it's now Africa's second largest economy, with the Nigerians and Dangote's latest oil refinery. They've taken #1 spot. South Africa is on #2, but I'm sure you're going to reclaim it somehow. The mic is over to you, Mr. Kgoshi.
Thank you, Kura. Good evening, ladies and gents. I'm going to try just jump in on the trends and tell you about the next most sexy things to do. Like my friend Mashiru likes saying, what is the most sexy thing to worry yourself about? You would know that our biggest struggle now in South Africa is power. Load shedding is a struggle, is holding us by the throat. Not much can be done at the rate that we are going, but we still get to find guys that are very resilient where property development are concerned. I mean, you can't believe that in the midst of COVID, at the height of load shedding, Vivian Reddy and crew launched the Ocean Mall in Durban. They said they are bringing Dubai to South Africa. It's quite a big center there. You wonder how did they pull it off, consider the negativity that is surrounding load shedding and the struggles of high unemployment in South Africa. But anyway, such a development goes to show that someone is looking at things differently from the rest of us, and that's very encouraging. In terms of trends, we do work nationwide. The things that we are seeing, let me start on the residential side. On residential, what is happening in most all CBDs, let me call it like that, your Pietermaritzburg, Johannesburg, Pretoria and them, you'll notice that I won't be sounding that much of an alarm where Cape Town is concerned, because Cape Town is a different fish altogether. To fish that one, you need a very wide net. But mentioning those cities, say KZN, Gauteng, a bit of Mpumalanga and Nelspruit, but not much in Nelspruit. What is happening is guys are buying your high-rise offices that have been converted into, be it student accommodation, be it to social housing, flats and such. We're involved through SHRA, the social housing company. We did a few of the evaluations in some of the cities nationwide, where they are financing purchase of block of flats for conversion into, a block of offices in conversion into blocks of flats. The reason being, you can imagine now with the current interest rate going up, it's expected that it's going to still go up, although some guys are saying we finally reached the ceiling for the year. But should it go up, it then means that those that were thinking of buying houses can't afford it now. The best next thing for them is for them to go into the rental route, which is why the demand for residential accommodation, especially flats, seems to be the way to go about. The other thing that we are seeing on the residential side as well is there is a lot of peri-urban developments popping up. There is one in the Eastern Cape, in the Tumbu area. People are getting close to town. They buy, you can call it communal land, because there is no right of ownership given to you, like a PTO type of a thing. They buy there, they build very expensive houses, very fancy looking houses. It's happening in KZN as well. I've seen some in the Pongola area. There's also happening in Polokwane, also in Venda. Those of you who are on Facebook, you know that the Venda people are really taking pride in having some of the biggest houses in South Africa that are unencumbered. They're not even paying rates and taxes on those. So as a result, it then leads us into the commercial space where retail centers are following the human settlement. When people decide to build in those areas, property developers like the Masingida Group and like Vivian Reddy, as I mentioned, they are going to those areas and are putting up centers that are very interesting to see. Nice convenience centers that are fully let. I was in Limpopo not long ago. I saw a Masingita development. It's fully let with some very interesting anchor tenants that one wouldn't have thought that one day a village would see itself sitting with a center that has got your Pick and Pay, ShopRite, all the type of banks, your Capitec and them. That type of a model is being seen happening nationwide. It's not restricted to one province or one city or one area. It happens, it's emulated everywhere. You go to KZN, you see it. You go to Mpumalanga, to Nelspruit, you go to Mpumalanga, Krizani municipality, you find the likes of Waha Plaza having been increased in terms of GLA. It's a rural center in the middle of nowhere, as many people used to say many years ago, until they realized that there were people living there. Finally, now someone is listening and doing something about it. And then on the industrial front, the president spoke of smart cities. We are yet to see one taking off. He was proud of the Lanseria one that ought to have been up by now. There was the Aeropolis one in Kempton Park that also sort of took forever to really show up. But what has happened is that if you're driving from the OR Tambo Airport going towards Pretoria, you will see that there's a logistics hub that is coming up there. Guys are putting up modern warehousing there. I know the DSV one that is apparently worth almost R1 billion. So you can tell that there's appetite for modern housing. I'm glad Kura did mention that they are also trying their best to really get themselves to a situation where they can have such modern housing, warehousing being put up. It's happening already here in South Africa. Along the major routes, you go to on the N1 to Bloemfontein, is there. N1 going towards Paarl in Cape Town as well, you're also seeing it. And also in Gauteng, I'll talk more of Gauteng because much as the Cape Town people are arguing, but we still find Gauteng to be carrying the rest of the country. If you're driving along the N14, there are new centers coming up where guys are putting up dealerships there for trucks and the like. It happens on the N12 as well, although I feel aggrieved with the N12 because I feel that's a very wasted opportunity because the N12 carries a very huge traffic. I would have thought that we could have put up different types of development there, not necessarily just for people to go and sell commercial vehicles, but it has happened. So, and then on the agri side, what we are seeing is some of the farmers, mostly from Limpopo and Mpumalanga, have decided to go via Maputo Maputo Harbor for them to take their fruits, their fresh produce anywhere else in the world instead of going to Durban because of the long queues. It's public knowledge that Transnet is struggling a lot with their harbors, and their railway lines are almost non-existent, as we know. So now it means that one has to be on the road in a truck to really ferry their goods wherever they are going. So guys are choosing to go via Mpumalanga instead of the native Durban. The other area that we are seeing is that on the agri side, with the restrictions like Tempest said in Botswana with the fresh produce, it has happened that the farmers complained that people who are farming mostly in the South of America, like Brazil and the like, are really hitting them hard because they are faced with a market where your likes of Italy, England, and Europe and those are concerned. So it talks back to how we are doing our own logistics back here at home. So interest rate being another issue, like I mentioned earlier, there are guys that are joking, saying that the voice of the commissioner of the Reserve Banks is actually more louder than the interest rate itself. So the moment you hear his voice, you know that trouble is coming. I know it doesn't sound right, but that argument is being put forward. The other thing as well that we are seeing is on the offices, it remains a very hard hit type of a sector. We are doing valuations, the capitalization rates are going up, guys are struggling, but we still find that the shared office model still works where you pay on use, you walk in, pay for the day, and then off you go. There's a new one that just came up that I was involved in somewhere in Devon, another one in Midrand. So it shows that, and those are post-COVID developments. That goes to show that indeed there's someone out there listening and really paying attention. So those are sort of our trends. I don't want to go too deep because, like Kura said, they try and keep close to the time as much as possible. But what are the other things that one could be looking at that are coming up? Peri-urban developments are taking shape. Like I said, guys are choosing to build houses not far away from popular metros, mostly in the rural province like the Northwest, Mpumalanga, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, and them. As a result, then the type of centers that are following your retail centers, they are very good. There is an opportunity there. The other thing as well is, in terms of the peri-urban developments, there are mines coming up in many areas in Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and also the Northwest. That really helps in retaining people from not moving to the cities. As a result, there's a need for accommodation there, and there's a need for all sorts of developments like your tourism centers, retail centers. People are looking for hotels, B&Bs, and the like. So those are sort of some of the high demand that you could be looking at. Student accommodation is one of the most important ones. Yes, we agree. Although we have seen guys really bending their fingers where student accommodation is concerned, because some of them try and do that development in line with the NSFAS. You end up having a center that is converted, hoping that NFAS will endorse it, and they don't, and you are really struggling to let it out because you would have spent a lot of money on it, and then you can't really leverage value on it. So with that said, let me not extend it for long. Maybe take any question, but it wouldn't be about load shedding. I won't be able to answer that one. I am hoping the Minister of Energy, as we have it now, he will stop dancing there and really solve the issues. He's friends with Mashilo, so maybe Mashilo can answer where the Minister of Energy is concerned. And I know that Mashilo will be going in and just to add on where South Africa is concerned. But let me take a question from Tempest, and then I will give Mashilo to have a word.
Thank you so much, sir, for the presentation. This is a question actually to you and Mashilo as well as Kura. What is the status in terms of purchasing? Because for us, since COVID, what a lot of developers have done is to, introduce flexible payment plans rather than, the upfront 100% selling price that they're asking for. So is it something that is also gaining traction in South Africa, Zim, or what? How is it set up in your areas?
Not really here, not yet at least. What we are seeing is there are banks that are trying to. Some of the developers will go to a bank and convince them to really take part in financing in their development. But you still find a situation where the LTV, the loan to value that some of the banks are taking is really punitive to the buyers. Although there are cases where you get someone saying, I'm like to have been given 100% funding in me trying to buy into a development. But there are cases where you get a 80-20, 90 are not unfamiliar. They are still out there. So one really buying the way that you guys are doing there in Botswana, not yet. I've not come across a development where such a model has been done. But I'm also aware that in some areas, I know one in Mpumalanga where some guys put up funding out of their own pockets, put up a development, and I heard that not many of the units there have been financed through your native way of going through the mortgage via bank. They are able to really have a plan as to how one can be able to pay in tranches until they are done. As to how are they controlling the risk of one not living up to their expectations, I'm not sure. But I've heard that I think it's in Sekunda, if I'm not mistaken, in the Ivenda area.
Interesting. Thank you so much. I think Mashilo and Kura can also answer the question that I had.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you look at a split between first-time home buyers and your traditional resales, right, on the residential side, there's a 55-45 split in favor of first-time home buyers, and the majority being obviously women. They still, as my friend Kgoshi has said, that the traditional 100%, I mean, it's not back in the market, but if you're lucky enough, if you're a first-time home buyer in the 55% lot, you can score something close enough to 100%, but you still be expected, of course, to make sure that you can cover the taxes, transfer fees, whatever model. If it's in the development, it's either it's VAT, all of those, whatever taxes that comes with, and transfer duties. You still expected to cover those. So although you get 100%, some banks might give you 105 to cover a little bit of that. You still expected. In the resale market, I don't think the 100% is back. You as it says, you either get 80-20, or you get 90-10. If you're lucky, you get 90-10. Particularly as in the luxury and the middle income and the luxury properties. And in South Africa, middle income starts around, I think, 700, and the luxury starts around 1 million or 1.3, 1.5. So in those segments, definitely you're not going to get 100%.
Right.
You have to put your skin in the game. In the commercial sector, we have seen quite a number of entities that are struggling with their LTVs. I mean, the LTVs are deteriorated. There's a few that have recovered, but there's still those that have breached their covenants, where the LTVs are hovering just too close to 40% or just above 40%. There's one or two that are really struggling because their LTVs are around 50-60%. I think Delta is one of them that is struggling. We know the story of Reboses. So there's still that recovery that still needs to come through on the commercial side. The post-COVID recovery, the earnings have recovered, but not fully, so that they make up for that, the blood that came during COVID. So if you look at it in that way, that's my response will be, on the residential side, I don't see the return of the 100% unless otherwise it's in affordable housing or first-time home buyers. It's not going to come back, not anytime soon. And then on commercial sides, we'll just watch the recovery of the LTVs, particularly those that deteriorated significantly, but there's a lot of deterioration on the LTVs because the earnings are recovering to make up for that difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ramashilo. Kura, and what's going on in Zim? How is it looking in Zim in terms of paying in installments? Or more flexible in payment plans?
So we do not have a mortgage industry to speak of. We've been having this webinar for all of 2 hours, and today, in between, when Kgoshi was finishing off, I had some load shedding, that's why I disappeared. So I just picked up the conversation now. If I look at the published statistics, and I'm grateful that our biggest bank by capitalization is part of the sponsors on the Center for Affordable Housing Studies. They produce an annual yearbook, and it'll be a great thing for anybody in the property space to pick that up, because it gives you a helicopter view, a page on each country. So if I take up the 2022 edition of that, Zimbabwe operates on about 3,900. Get that number, 3,900 registered mortgages. Because we don't have long-term providers of capital, if you get a loan in Zimbabwe dollars, you can imagine when that dollar rate has gone from 1 to 1 to 1 to 10 to 1 to 7,500 where it stands today, it just evaporates that debt away. So we've done this. This is our second time round. We have the enviable or the unenviable history of having done this before, where we had billions and billions and trillions of dollars. So lending is not really something people do here. This time around, it's come back and people are looking to lend US dollars, but there are not that many people who want to take that view, let alone the suppliers. We have a situation where we have bank balances where I can tell you I've got 50,000 US dollars in the bank, but I actually physically can't access it. I can transfer it internally, the terms and conditions, if I want to send it out to South Africa. So you've got like a hothouse. So property lending is very low here. On the commercial side, I'd say it's non-existent.
Interesting. And Kura, just a last one on the Zimbabwean agricultural space with the farms and everything. Are there any sort of bans like we have with South Africa? Is there opportunities for foreigners to also purchase farms there? How's the general climate there when it comes to agriculture?
So our history is that we took the land from the kith and kin of the British, and we made it a national asset. So the land is supposed to be held in trust in the name of the head of state for us to keep hold of it. And you apply for a right to use it. There are leases, there are offer letters, but those leases have not been found by financial providers to provide them the kind of security that if you're taking a $3-4 million loan against that ground, your security of tenure, there is the perception that there is political allocations and a sudden revocations, or a farm looks good because it was under this operator, it got taken over, that the new operator was not as good as that one, and he puts it down and wants to go somewhere else. So we've had that. We are 37 years, 42 years into independence, and we still are undergoing land audits where they're saying who got what, and it's never clear and transparent. So we do have an increase, and particularly post-COVID, we had a lot of younger white farmers returning from Zambia, Namibia, and coming home and reinvesting on leases with Black farmers who've been allocated that land. So that's the kind of investment that has been coming through. But you cannot, even as a citizen, expect to buy land, particularly state land. I did say that in our earlier presentation that there are some title deeds that remain held by Black operators, but they're the minority. The majority of farmland is not a freehold asset that you can access.
Thank you so much, Kura, for that.
Just a general question, Neltah and Kura. I mean, around South Africa, I mean, if you look at a basket of cost, right, in terms of your, because you want to drive cash flow and you want to drive your earnings, is in a basket of cost. One of the things that we have seen, and then I think Kgoshi alluded to this, despite my friend electricity, I haven't spoken to my friend now. So is that that basket of operating costs, electricity is obviously the highest driver. It takes quite a big chunk, but that basket has been growing, and particularly two items have been growing faster than anything else. One is obviously municipal taxes, two is electricity, and then so your cost of occupation, has been deteriorating, quite fast because of how municipalities, I would say, taken advantage of landowners, because it's one of those costs that you have no choice over. Are you seeing what is the authorities with regard to the view on, in your side of town, how they're dealing with those legislated costs that as a landowner you have no choice, but you just need to take it, bend over and take it?
Right. So in Botswana, in say Gaborone, we have the Gaborone City Council that is responsible for making sure that rates are paid by residents as well as property owners. So it's not too the cost is nothing that can deter someone from purchasing a property in Botswana. Well, in Gaborone. And then what we have in terms of properties that are tribal land, obviously it's a 50-year long lease, whereas freehold land, it's 99, it's in perpetuity really. So our costs when it comes to that, I don't think that that's significantly high. I'd anticipate that South Africa's basket, as you mentioned, the basket of the costs, it's way more than what we have to look at. Also with electricity, obviously we're using prepaid meters. We've changed from postpaid, it's now prepaid. Water is still on a postpaid basis, but they're slowly trying to move it to prepaid because we're getting really crazy charges. You can find two people staying in a house and they'll say you need to pay, your bill is coming up to 50,000 a month, and you're wondering how on earth is that possible. So they're trying to introduce prepaid water systems, which is something also that private developers, say for example you're living in an estate, they would have each unit having its own individual water meter that reads your water consumption, and then they just simply prorate it amongst the tenants, or they can give you a voucher, or with a voucher then you can punch it in and then get your electricity or get your water. So that's in terms of the larger developers who have the muscle and who have the financial backing. They are going more in that prepaid direction to make sure that recoveries are done properly, well in time, and also fairly. Kura, I think we can hand over to you now.
Thank you very much for that. We can always point our fingers to governments, but our experience of economic turmoil in Zimbabwe, I think, has made us as citizens corrupt. Because we have this funny system of the exchange rate can go from 1 to 7,500. There's no incentive for me to stay current with my rates and taxes. And because it's a political environment where the town council or city council is of a particular party, and then overarching that the national government is in competition with them, there's never any harmony between those two levels of government. So they cannot increase rates and taxes without having a political cost. So what does that mean? My rates and taxes on a northern suburb property cost me less than what my cell phone bill is. It's laughable. And we then complain that we don't get service delivery, but we have not in any way, shape, or form costed and are able to sustain what should be a reasonable service. I live in an area with a house on a hill, sounds glamorous. I get water for maybe 8 hours of the week. So I have 2 5,000-liter tanks, and the water comes in overnight, and I fill up those tanks, and then I've built my own reservoir, and that's how I operate. The balance of the city is buying water, we're drilling boreholes, we're getting water in from peri-urban areas or whoever's got a borehole. That's how it operates. Our operating costs are sub-economic, and there is no massive infrastructure upgrade to actually fund, let alone cater for the demand. And it's each man for himself, as they'll say in Swahili, shauri yako. So we look like a city, but beyond the planning the Rhodesians left us and the infrastructure the Rhodesians left us, we have not at all diligently improved, let alone capacitated, this level of government.
Thank you, Kura. Then Kgoshi. Kgoshi, you are muted.
I'm here. I'm very much here. Yes, no, look, like Kura said, Zimbabwe is open for business. We are open for business, Neltah, but this load shedding thing, honestly, is discouraging many, even our own citizens. We are trying to be as positive as we would like to, but unfortunately with load shedding, you can't say much. And the other thing is, I always joke with my friends that it doesn't really matter who's in charge of the government. Even if you change government tomorrow, load shedding is not going to go away anytime soon. It's a problem that we need to solve as residents collectively, without having to really be on one fence with a certain political party wearing a certain color. So with that said, our property sectors are unfortunately being affected badly, to a point that even some of the super regionals now are struggling really to really keep up, because at least for them, at first they could afford to put up generators for their centers and the like. But now, with the cost of diesel going up, unfortunately, everything seems to be really reaching a state of equilibrium where there's no better devil than the other, and there's no better person who's affording anything more than the other. So unfortunately for us, positivity remains a very sensitive topic. You can't be asking a South African now and say to them, how positive are you about the outlook of the future? You are practically asking them to try and really lie through their teeth, because they know that with load shedding being in full force like it is now, there's not much coming our way, unfortunately. And with that said, but we remain resilient. We are hopeful that at some point things will come together and will be back to our glory days.
Thank you, Kgoshi. Just in closing, this is just a final question. If you had the power to make a change in your country's real estate built environment sector, what is the first thing you think you would change? This is just a general question, really. I just came up with it now.
While I'm still unmuted, let me go at it before my colleagues come to. I'm one person that has always believed that you need to make property accessible to anyone who desire to own property or develop property. I will give an example. If you look at people who are now building houses on the borders or just on the outskirts of the cities in South Africa, it's an indication that they are hungry for land ownership. But our government is not doing much in trying to incorporate those into their planning where property ownership is concerned. And it's a very crucial market there, because some of the cities are leveraging value from those. And for governments, they can't even charge rates and tax on those because they're not providing any services. So for me, I believe that change can be seen and change can be effected by ensuring that those that are willing to really go out and invest on land, they need to be taken care of. So you would not believe that since our dawn of democracy until now, we have not had, I would say literally no one in the so-called natives, in the villages where land was transferred, ownership of land was transferred, except for the farms that came through land reform. And even with land reform as well, guys who are owning those tracts and tracts of lands, who are of the other race, unfortunately, are not willing to let the land go. Government is doing its best through the OVG and the other offices to try and make land reform work. But somewhere, somehow, they are still able to retain what they had many months ago. So for me, I believe that land reform is the most important that we need to be focusing on. I would definitely deal with that one as the first thing. Thank you very much.
Please don't do a Zimbabwe. Don't put politics above everything else. Your land reform process is painful, I know, but don't mortgage your kids' future doing it the wrong way around.
What's the red berets coming in charge? Something's gonna give.
Sure. Let's learn from each other. You don't have to make the mistakes we made, and you guys are well resourced.
Definitely.
So, my sister, to answer your question, I think our government needs to understand that government must govern, and people will do. And I'm not taking an ultra-capitalist view that markets will take care of themselves, but we are over-regulated, we are overtaxed, and we are behind times. I can do a valuation or a market appraisal on a transaction in Rosebank from the luxury of my phone. I can pick up my F&B app, I can get onto Lightstone, I can see rate per square meter in Rosebank and what has transferred at what price with a bond to who. Here in Harare, I must get into my car, drive into town, where if I park in the wrong place, I can get clamped, and when I'm clamped, for them to release my vehicle is going to cost me $163 to remove it. And I must go physically into a deeds office to look at a dusty piece of paper and come away with pneumonia. Our systems are paper-based, and we need to go. Make me Minister of Lands and Land Affairs, we'll go digital, we'll go blockchain. That blockchain is going to tell me exactly where every asset is and whose hands it's in. If it's municipal, if it's private, then we can make a plan. And then I can reduce my stamp duty from the crazy 4% that we have to pay conveyances, and it goes through to the state. It's ridiculous, it's anti-development. Then I would encourage economic stability where money can flow, and that flowing of money can create more money. Right now, if I've got it, I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to put it in US dollars. I'm going to go to Johannesburg and buy an apartment. I'm going to put it in a global REIT that gives me US dollar yields, because in Zimbabwe, holding on to money only causes me problems, because I'm going to need buckets and buckets more to buy anything of stability.
Interesting. Ramashilo?
Look, my closing comments will be on two areas. The one is that the township, there's an emerging bunch of players because I mean they say where market fails, that's when government plays. In South Africa, it looks like it's the opposite, that where government fails, the market seems to find a way to excel. And in affordable housing, there's an emerging bunch of players that are coming in. The stocks are still low, the volumes are still very low, but they're growing. And hopefully in 2-3 years' time, we'll see the residential listings on the REITs. I suspect, it's not only going to be the 1 or 2 that are there. We might see sort of number of players that are coming in. So that's the space for me to watch. The next other one is that, I mean, if you look at, if you bought 1,000 shares for Equitas or Growth Point in Jan, for Equitas, you probably bought it at 16 Rand, somewhere there. And then right now it's at somewhere like 12 Rand. If you bought Growth Point, it will be 14. Right now it's around 11 Rand. So the question that we need to watch for is this the deterioration of is this the reflection of the underlying asset, or just the deterioration of the top line? And that, for me, those are the sort of things that we need to be watching for, those two areas to say, there's underlying asset now the bottom coming off, or is just the deterioration based on the circumstances? And let's watch those emerging developers and the residential products. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Ramashilo. Kura, before I hand over to you, gents, there's a quick question from Eunice. She wants to know how each country is dealing with irregular or unplanned residential developments. Here in Botswana, they're demolished. That's the the short answer to it. So maybe Kura quickly, and Kgoshi Lemasilo can let us know what happens in our countries.
In our country, we hung Mugabe for demolishing them, but post him, they are proliferating, and we are rewarding some bad behaviors. So we have peri-urban areas that were once farmed, and then in particular densities, particularly in Harare South, there were land invasions, and those land invasions go back to history. And we've recently had a land invasion. It was Methodist land at a suburb that became Epworth. We took that over, and we have built houses helter-skelter as we want them, and they became state land. And on the eve of an election, title deeds have been handed out to the illegal occupier. So as a property person, I have a challenge with that. As a nationalist, I'm always delighted to see state land, which is idle, going into people's hands to create some sort of capital, but we've done it the wrong way around. And we have it as a state program, regularization of informal settlements. We are rewarding bad behavior, and it's going to create problems for us and our kids.
Kgoshi, take this one. I'll play the fifth.
I'll give an example of what happened in the Val, in the Vereeniging areas, Everton, Beverly Hills, and them. there were some illegal developments that came up there of houses and they were demolished. But generally in South Africa, it's easy for a person to move into a piece of land, but taking them out, it's hell. Government will take the cleaners because there are laws that really are protecting such. They are saying if you are taking a person out, offer them alternative accommodation. So that in a way sort of encourages people to really go the illegal way of doing things. But I've seen it was in Cape Town, I think in the Guguletu areas, they tried it. The municipality there quickly rushed in to go and demolish those. So there are pockets where demolitions are happening, but generally in South Africa, we've got laws that are protecting people who find themselves in an illegal corner, and you've got politicians as well who are leveraging votes from really advocating and supporting such. So to answer you directly, it does happen that they get demolished, but in some cases it becomes very difficult.
Thank you, Jens. Over to you, moderator. I think those are the only questions. Yeah, we don't have any more questions, Kura. Or is he gone again? I think Kura must have stepped out due to load shedding. But in closing, I can just close the session by thanking everyone who has attended. We sincerely appreciate your participation, and we would like you to know that this will be quite a regular program that we'll be having, and we will keep you posted, and hopefully we will see you again soon. Re Kgoshi and Re Mashilo, thank you so much for being part of the panel discussion. Please feel free to connect with either one of the panelists that you would like to reach out to in the different countries, Botswana, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, and we'll be more than happy to assist you in teaching you more about our industries here in Botswana, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, and what it is that you can leverage from. So thank you all, and we wish you a pleasant night. We'll be leaving the room just now. Thank you so much.